everyone, to another episode of Creative Inc. Today, my very special guest is Gerald E. Jones. Welcome to the show, Gerald.
So pleased to be with you again, Karina.
Yes, because we've actually spoke before on my podcast, Behind the Pen, quite some time ago. So we've got a lot of catching up to do. But for those that don't know who you are, let's give them a rundown, Gerald.
I have been a writer all my working life. I started I wrote mostly business and technical books for quite a number of years. And I was involved in computer graphics and IT back when it took a room full of computers to do anything. And about 15 years ago, I turned primarily to fiction. Uh, Preacher Stalls the Second Coming is the 14th novel of mine, and it's the fourth in the series, the award-winning series, Preacher Evan Wycliffe. And Evan is, some people call him agnostic. Is it possible to be an agnostic minister? And then also, some people think he's a faith healer, and because people in this small town in southern Missouri go to him with problems no one else wants to solve, and he's a data driller. He's a reluctant investigator. So that's the engine in the series, and I'm really pleased to have developed that very thoughtful series of mysteries. So thank you for
So
asking.
14 books. A Preacher, of course, as you said, this is your main series, the one that's the fans are just going crazy about and winning awards on. And not that you haven't won awards on your other books, but let's start from the beginning. Your first book, what was it? Not the technical one, the fiction side.
Yes. The first was the first of three. It was a series of three romantic comedies, rather
Oh,
serious and silly satiric romantic comedies. What in another age might have been called a skirt chasing story. Young man hoping to get successful. And the first one was called My Inflatable Friend. And it was about a car jockey. And it was about a car jockey at a Beverly Hills hotel, Rollo Hemphill, who he actually is on probation from an arrest from computer hacking. He's trying to go straight, as it were. And he has a romantic fixation on the hairdresser at this luxury hotel, but she won't pay him any attention. Also, there is a maturing star, a glamorous woman who's living in a bungalow at the hotel. And so Rollo gets the lame idea to dress a life-size sex doll up to look like the aging star and drive it around Hollywood in a convertible. And of course, the paparazzi pick up on it, and there are headlines that he's having an affair with the star. The irony is, and the engine of comedy is, when the newspaper people confront the star, she says, "Oh, yeah, he's my boyfriend." So, for her
oh,
own private reasons. So that
oh,
gets way out of hand. And
especially when he doesn't want her.
I
He
often say
wants a hairdresser.
it's the story of a young man failing upward.
So
Careful what you ask for.
yeah, most definitely. I love the humor of that. But my first question, because it's it was your debut novel.
Yes,
Why that idea? Where did the plot come from? What were you reading or watching to get an idea like that?
I had also written quite a few speculative screenplays because, of course, I'm over here on the left coast. And My Inflatable Friend was really initially intended as a movie.
Oh
And the
wow!
inspiration for it came from I was visiting a friend who actually he was an English teacher out in Palm Springs, and I was a guest uh, lecturer at one of his classes. And I happened to stop by his apartment on my way back to Los Angeles, and there was a huge 6 foot high inflatable green dinosaur in his living room. And it was
Okay.
just a decoration. I said, "What's
Just
that?" And he
sitting
said,
there.
"That's my inflatable friend." And that phrase just stuck in my imagination. And it just kept, it's like, there has to be a story behind it. And then, of course, the, the idea or the notion, the invention of these sex dolls that actually they have steel skeletons and silicone skin
Yeah.
and very
Yeah.
highly realistic.
Scary. Very
That was
realistic
just
now.
beginning to be discussed back then. And
Yeah.
now, of course, there was a story, I want to say it might have been around the time that you and I spoke last. There was a story in the Russian media that one of their sports people, and I think he was a wrestler, had actually applied to the government to marry his sex doll. So I was ahead of my time, I suppose. Rollo never marries the doll.
Talk about a fetish. I mean, geez. Wow.
Well, actually, it becomes more when you carry a premise like this to its logical conclusion. It turns out that he really has no interest in the doll for its supposed use. His main use for the doll, because he still continues to be rebuffed by this hairdresser, is the doll is really a good conversationalist. He has he has long
You have good
discussions.
conversations with her. Okay.
becomes a
Yeah.
becomes a companion. Yes, of course.
That makes total sense. Oh, the poor lonely man. No wonder the hairdresser's staying away from him. Oh dear. Okay. Well, I love, like I said, I love the story. And for a debut novel, did it when you released it? Did it go well?
It has gone well, and it's been recently re-released,
Oh,
and with a new cover, and the whole series got new covers, and both the first book in the first ebook in but all of the books are in ebooks and
mhm.
trade paperback, but
Yeah.
the the first book in each of those series, My Inflatable Friend and Preacher Finds a Corpse, which is the first in the Preacher series, those are set to permanently free ebook. So
Oh, so
not a
people
day.
get the first episode of the series for free.
Then they get hooked, of course, and it
Of
becomes an addiction. But
course.
uh, no,
Perfect. A great
not a day
marketing
goes
plot.
by, but not a day goes by, but that those books get find new
Yeah,
fans.
no, I'm not. I would. I'm really not surprised by that. But just going back for those readers out there that don't know what we authors go through when it comes to writing and marketing our books, when a book drops off with sales and ratings, there's a reason for it, and it could be the price, it could be the blurb. Most likely, it is a cover, and we authors have to, no matter how old our book is, keep on with the marketing trend, what the readers are looking for in a cover to make sure that our book is still seen. So I can understand why you changed your covers. I do the same with mine. It's a case of having to do that to as a keep up with the marketing. Yeah.
Well, there's a lesson learned about that, and I found it quite surprising. Is that I used to work very closely with a book designer who every cover he did was an original. It
Hmm.
was unlike anything else that had been done. And one of the things that's happened, and perhaps as a result of mass marketing through online,
AI. Yeah, I
Amazon,
agree.
uh, is that cover books in a particular genre, and romance is a very good example. Uh, they have a degree of similarity. Not
They have to
only
though.
not only the ripped hero naked to the waist,
Hmm.
but also the type style and
Yeah,
the
the fonts, the
and the
colouring,
colors.
everything.
And I
Yeah.
began to realize that some of these services that that they do books with, it wasn't just AI. Before that, it was offshore designers, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And for modest price, they would give you half a dozen book cover suggestions.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the criticisms from people early on was that, oh, well, those covers look so much like other stuff that's out. Well,
Yeah,
it turns out that's the point.
that's the point, because
The
the reader is used to seeing those
Yes,
covers. You have
it's just
something
like you're
that's not
selling a bottle of
similar.
ketchup. It's got to look like, if you're going to compete with Heinz
Bingo.
ketchup, it better look like a
Bingo.
ketchup
And for
bottle.
those authors that are out there listening to this now and haven't released their book or have released their book, take note, because you need to go onto Amazon. It is the number one place for books. Look at the top books, top 100 books in the category, the topic if it's non-fiction, the genre if it's fiction, and see what the covers are like, because the consumer, your reader, recognizes that cover, wants that kind of book. And if your cover doesn't have that kind of similar, it's got to stand out, but it still needs to be similar to the top selling books, then you just don't have a chance, unfortunately. So thank you for bringing that up. It's a very interesting uh, topic to talk about to authors and readers alike, because they don't really know what goes on when it comes to marketing and promoting books. But let's get back to your amazing books and your amazing writing. Um, the Preacher series. What started you writing that first book? What was it that inspired you into that? I know characters talk to you, and they really, really do not shut up until you actually start writing a book about them. But where did Preacher come from?
The first book in the series, as I mentioned, is Preacher Finds a Corpse. And this actually was an event in my own. My family, going back a generation, is from southern Missouri, from the farmland just north of the Ozarks. And I had a relative who, he was a NRA member. He always had firearms, and he did away with himself. Um, um, he wasn't. He wasn't. He was. I'd say early middle age. It was way before his time, and it was something of a mystery in the family. Um, and I suppose one might say I simply just wanted, closure is the wrong word, because closure sometimes sounds like vengeance or whatever, but I just wanted a way to explain this event to myself.
Mm.
And often that's true with fiction. I think, if I couldn't put some of the unfortunate or puzzling events of my life into fiction, I'd probably be committed somewhere.
You do get
So
closure. Yeah, it is
right.
therapeutic to
Oh yeah,
talk
very
about. I
very
mean,
much so. So
readers
so but
don't
the
have
other
to know
thing
it's
is,
about us.
well, the other thing is about since this was a mystery, I had to have an investigator character, and I'll be the first to admit that I don't have much of a background in criminology. Okay, I mean, certainly I'm an avid reader of mysteries and spy novels. Also, John le Carre, I really admire him, but what I needed was what now in the genre would be termed amateur sleuth, because I needed somebody who knew as little as I did about that then not necessarily following police procedure. But also I was raised as a Southern Baptist, and now I guess you'd say, well, I'm either New Age or a profound I don't know as maybe I wouldn't go so far as to say agnostic, perhaps a doubter some mornings, but I thought it would be fascinating to have someone who was in the role of a counselor to the community that's small, because that farm community in southern Missouri, small scale family farming is really very much a thing of the past, and it's something of an economic challenge to just make it from day to day in that environment economically. And I have Evan going off to his farm boy, but gets a scholarship, goes off to Harvard Divinity School, thinks he's going to be a minister, thinks he's going to come back to his hometown and become a minister. And he learns enough about the background of the Christian church that he becomes extremely discouraged. All you have to do is learn a bit of Christian history to realize that it's not very Christian.
Yeah.
And so then he drops out of Harvard Divinity and he enrolls himself in MIT in astrophysics. And I also had quite a background in college in astronomy, not only in the physics of astronomy, but also in the history of astronomy. And I did a paper, undergraduate paper, on astronomy in Dante, in the Divine Comedy. And it turns out that Dante was such a scholar of astronomy that the configuration of stars in the sky as he is entering the dark wood of error in the Inferno is extremely accurate. I mean, it's very well planned out. And so who Dante was showing off to, maybe just a few other scholars in the world, I don't know. But what I did was, as the engine, as the inciting incident in Preacher Finds a Corpse, I have Evan Wycliffe he returns to Southern Missouri. He's discouraged by astrophysics too. And he had a fiance who died tragically. And so he's really got nothing left. So he goes back home and he's a guest preacher, just a part-time job, trying to figure out what he's doing. But he stumbles across the corpse of his best friend in a cornfield on a winter morning.
Oh.
And so the question really, it's not a question so much as it certainly looks like suicide. And the local sheriff certainly thinks it's suicide. The evidence points in that direction.
He knows his friend wouldn't do that.
He knows his friend wouldn't do that. So the question is driving someone to murder themselves, is that murder? Where and actually under the law, we've got recent famous example, is telling somebody to go down the street and commit a riot, is that the same as committing the riot yourself? This is a question that continues to plague us in just
manipulation and coercing. Yeah.
Well, and in Preacher Stalls the Second Coming, we have an unscrupulous cult leader, an evangelist, who's luring people to his farm with promises of food. And so this is post-COVID. Some people impoverished, some people homeless, some people disadvantaged, and they go there, and they also happen to be what you would call faithful people who are believing the message.
Yeah.
Yes, and there is so much these days, and I think that we can easily talk about the rise of authoritarianism worldwide, and I think among some thoughtful people, the reaction is, well, these people are nuts, or they're really blindly racist, whatever. No, that's not the fundamental reason. The reason is that people these days, regardless of what side of the political spectrum you happen to be on, people these days are terrified. When I grew up and I was going to school, there was perhaps one thing that scared us badly, and that was nuclear warfare, during the Cold War.
Still does.
Well, not only it still does, but now we've got such a long list. We've got
of
climate
countries
change.
ready to press that button. Yeah,
we've got
yeah,
climate
it's terrifying.
Change. We've got refugees from conflicts all over the world, and mass migrations not only because of warfare and devastation and privation, but also because of climate issues. We've got water shortages. We've got land grabs. We've got aristocratic class with a separation of income levels, primarily because of automation.
Yeah.
Primarily because it doesn't take a lot of people to run a big company anymore. So,
No, it doesn't,
and we've
sadly.
got huge concentration of wealth, and so we've got people who just want a strong leader, just as they did in late 1930s Weimar Republic Germany. People who want a
Yeah.
leader who will tell them, "I'll take care of things. I will make
Yeah.
the trains run on time. I will make the bad man go away."
And
Well,
that's who preacher is it?
again, careful what you ask for.
You
because,
know what
because
I love
that
about your writing, Gerald, is that you're not scared about talking about tough topics and things in the news that are involved in our everyday life or going on around the world. You're not frightened about writing about them, and you do go pretty deep. I like your new book, Preacher Stalls the Second Coming. I mean, this is going really into some.
well, there's actually two other third rail topics in this book. Is the other thing that I stumbled across when I was doing my research is that there actually was a U.S. government secret plot during the early Cold War to fake the second coming of Christ. They were going to fire fireworks, special effects, whatever, from a submarine off the coast of Cuba. And the idea, and then, loudspeakers would announce whatever. And the idea would be to convince the Cuban people, the faithful, predominantly Catholic, or also evangelical Cuban people, that Fidel Castro was the Antichrist. Try to get them to rise up against him. Now, this plot came out in the Church Commission report. Senator Frank Church did an investigation of the entire intelligence community back then, and it was a rather silly plot. It was about the time that they were also planning to slip Fidel some exploding cigars or poison or whatever. So I mean, the plot,
Rah rah Rasputin, isn't it?
the plot
It's like
went
Russia all
away.
over again.
But the thing, I knew of that, and I thought, well, let's update that story. But then, as I dug into it, it turns out there's a current conspiracy theory.
A current one.
There's a conspiracy theory called Project Bluebeam that was in a book by a French researcher. I don't know whether you could call him that, in the 90s. Project Bluebeam, which is a conspiracy being managed by NASA in conjunction with the deep state to, yes, fake the second coming of Christ for somebody's political objective. So
Wow.
it's about as ridiculous as they come. But then see, also, when you have virtual reality and you have now, and my research also showed that if you project a hologram onto what amounts to a dense cloud, you can make some very, very convincing, realistic images.
Yeah, I bet.
So you could depict. Now, I don't know that people these days would believe that angels have wings, but I think that they could certainly believe in extraterrestrial beings that have halos, and perhaps rampant lions that are posing as a power symbols in a kingly crest. Those kinds
In
of
the
images.
cloud.
Yes, of course, and the cloud, and you could put it in the cloud, or you could put it in the same room that people are in. I mean, all you need is some. It turns out there actually was a Japanese. It was a joint project. It was University of Arizona, I believe, and it was also a Japanese university. It was about a dozen years ago, and they succeeded in highly realistic holograms in synthetic clouds. They would generate, and they had some chemicals in the clouds that would be, I don't think they were like ice crystals or something that was very highly reflective. So it wasn't just your garden variety puff of smoke. But this is very possible. And then, of course, now, with VR combined with AI
AI.
on the internet,
Scary,
and
scary,
we're
scary,
all we're
scary.
already talking about political ads where somebody, you're going to see a talking head, and whoever that personage is never said those things.
Yeah.
There's it's simply being, so it's like you can't believe anything
So
you see
going
anymore.
back to your book a minute, the idea that you've used, I mean, which country is it that's trying to fake the second coming in your book?
I have actually set this in southern Missouri. It's where
Where he's
Evan,
from?
it's where Evan is, and one of the young members of his church disappears inside that farm, a
Hmm.
young woman. So he's got to find out where she is, because he that's one of the things. It was difficult. There was, of course, the Jonestown um, incident years ago. There was the Branch Davidians at Waco. There have been some recent incidents elsewhere in the world, but again, much of the time, these compounds, if you will, are located in remote areas of some developing nation. Okay. And so it was a challenge, since I wanted to set this in Evan's backyard. It was a challenge to try to figure out how could that occur here, because you would think, with
It would be a big city, a big town where loads of
well
people would see
well,
it and the
well
news and everything. Why a
even if
small
you were to put
place?
it even if you were to put in the middle of, in a remote area of farm country, as I did in east of Appleton City, which is a real town where Evan calls his hometown. Even if you were to put it there, you've got enough overflight by Google mapping drones, by whatever, that it just would be difficult to hide things. And I began to realize that actually you don't need to hide it. The minute that the truth starts to come out, you've got all kinds of alternative stories in social media.
Mm. So it does
Oh,
what
oh,
it's
it's
supposed to
it's
do.
it's it's fake news. Those body
It's
bags are
doing
just
what it needed to do.
loaded with
Yeah.
pillows. The deep state is trying to convince you that something's going on here. I mean, it and so you get fanciful story on fanciful story. It's like, oh, they were eating babies there. Oh, they were harvesting organs for transplants.
But
If you
they
get a
got what they
hundred
wanted. They got the publicity.
if you get 100 stories, you don't know what to believe. And that is a classic approach to disinformation used by
Yeah.
governments all over the world, is that
Mm.
if you can't hide something, what you do is you manufacture all kinds of competing stories, especially some that are really wacko, so that you can say, oh, it's just another conspiracy theory. Storytelling, if you will. Okay, those are the things that make life worth living, is interacting with each other as
Hmm.
a community, as you and I are doing now across the pond, right?
Yeah.
Well, why would we bother to communicate if we thought both of our lives were perfect, and we're just
Yeah.
hanging out here in this wonderful. And so I have Evan thinking, and I think myself, is like, if there is something called reincarnation, um if I can't come back coming back as a person could be kind of hard, because maybe the circumstances wouldn't be as good. But you know can I put in my job application to be an angel? Now that's got to be hard work. Okay.
I hate to stop you now. I mean, I could carry on talking with you for hours, but unfortunately, we've run out of time. So, can you tell people where they can find out more about you and your amazing book, especially the new book and the Preacher series?
Well, yes, very easy. GeraldEverettJones.com, just as it's spelled here on the book cover. And there are links to review copies of my books. There is a complete book list that has, I even have a nonfiction book, How to Lie with Charts, that is taught in various college courses. And if our politicians are lying to you, maybe it's my fault. So yes, GeraldEverettJones.com. Go there.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Gerald. I hope you come on the show again because we've got so much more to talk about. Wishing you all the best with your new release and your future ones.
I'm halfway through writing the next one, Karina.
Yeah, of course you are.
Okay.